My Lords, I declare my membership of Peers for the Planet and rise chiefly to speak to my amendment, the regret motion, which I tabled because during recess and subsequently on school and community visits, in the light of the fact that the World Meteorological Organisation has just predicted that there's a 50% chance that in the next 5 years the world will break 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, the maximum that Paris identified as bearable for people and planet, there's a huge amount of fear and despair, desperation about the climate and nature crisis. And I think we need to acknowledge the mental health and well-being impacts of that, as well as the very great dangers so powerfully highlighted by the Right Reverend Prelate in his powerful maiden speech. The ways forward are known. They've been worked through and worked out, and indeed, as I have to make mention, first time back in the House, proved very popular as reflected by the wonderful Green Party local election results that we've just enjoyed. So to run through very briefly the 4 elements of this amendment. The first is the Climate and Ecology Bill, and I believe the Noble Lord, Lord Reddersdale, has indicated that he plans to bring this before your Lordship's House. And this acknowledges that the climate and nature crises are deeply interrelated. And I have to note at this point that we have the Office in Environmental Protection, created under the Environment Act, in its first major intervention and report, has warned the government in the strongest terms that our nation's nature is at the risk of desperate tipping points. It warns of a massive loss of wildlife further from our already depleted levels now, of fisheries collapse, of dead rivers, and, I quote Dame Glenys Stacey, a sustainable environment is not just nice to have, but essential for human well-being, progress and prosperity. I do hope that the government will be listening to that Office Environmental Protection report. Also in the amendment is the Green New Deal, acknowledging the need for investment, energy efficiency, as the Noble Lord, Lord Teverson, just set out, but also, as other Noble Lords have set out, Baroness Hayman, onshore wind, Baroness Whittaker on harnessing the power of our oceans. The amendment also calls for the abolishing the maximum economic recovery duty. I note that we've just marked our 6th-month anniversary of our chair position as COP26. And I look back to that meeting in Glasgow where global experts, independent people said, you, the UK, as chair of COP26, must commit to no new oil and gas. That's what the experts said. And finally, and this might be the surprising one in this amendment, it calls for the extension of the right to roam. That reflects the fact that we have an Environment Agency that's been slashed back, is desperately struggling to protect our natural world, and indeed we have the threats of more. Citizen scientists are out there right now sampling our rivers, looking at our wildlife populations, doing huge amounts of work. The right to roam gives people the chance to fill in where the government has failed. And also, of course, to give people the chance to develop and a love of nature to protect it. 2 final extra points. The opening words of the speech. My government's priority is to grow the economy. Well, as other Noble Lords would do, I'd question the deliverability of that. But more, I would strongly question the wisdom. We've been chasing, with varying levels of success, growth for decades. And look at the state of society we have now. The cost of living crisis is not a new thing arising from energy prices. It's a decades-long struggle, as marked by the rise of food banks. Who are we growing the economy for? Are we just making the few even richer? And finally, I do have to point to one of the many signs of intellectual coherence in the government's programme. The speech contains both the Financial Services and Markets Bill. Here we hear talk of increasing competitiveness, cutting red tape. Yet it also contains the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill, acknowledging the fact that we have a huge corruption problem in the UK. It acknowledges that the City of London is not just a creaking galleon with a few rotten apples in its barrels, but a ship rotten to its timbers, decaying in its sails. Avoiding shipwreck, protecting the security of all of us, requires strong medicine and controls, not setting sail for the open seas on course for one of our nation's many tottering tax havens.
Yeah.